Hey guys, it's Alessio, and thanks very much for watching. In this video, what I want to talk about is my favorite subject, of course, Bitcoin. So I want to bring to your attention one particular chart, actually two charts I want to show you in this particular video. First is this chart of Bitcoin that you can see here with this black background here. Here's an interesting thing about this. Bitcoin, we know, has dropped about 85% to its lows. It has, of course, bounced from those lows. But what's really interesting, as you can see from this chart, is where it's bounced from, which is that green line you see running through that chart. That, of course, is the 200 weekly moving average. The 200 weekly moving average is a key level of support. And we can see Bitcoin has successfully managed to bounce off that level. That's important to actually note because the 200 weekly average has historically and statistically been a level where most markets, not just Bitcoin, but most markets have tended to bottom. There was, in fact, a time back in 2015, I think it was, when Bitcoin dropped to the 200 moving average on the weekly chart and bounced from it and rallied higher. So this is a key level, and it should not be ignored because it's very probable that Bitcoin could likely bottom near that 200 moving average. However, I don't think we have bottomed just yet. If we just actually notice that the pulse has ended on that chart as well. Let me just go to the next chart, this particular. Yeah, so this chart you see here, notice it shows something interesting. The pulse signal, of course, showing us the big momentum move. The momentum move that started way back in November of last year pushed Bitcoin down to the 200 moving average, and Bitcoin managed to bounce off. You can see bounced off the 200 weekly average. And the momentum, it's very interesting, the momentum on that pulse has dissipated, something we predicted back, I think, November, December of last year. We said, look, the average pulse momentum lasts about 8 to 10 bars, 8 to 10 weeks, in other words, and it actually dissipated now. As you can see, the pulse momentum dissipated back in January, I think, by the looks of it. The pulse momentum has finished, which means what? The momentum that drove Bitcoin downwards has now dissipated, diminished. But just to mention, I don't think that Bitcoin has just bottomed just yet. I don't think we've seen the end of this downward move. I think we could have yet another downward push, probably in the next few months, maybe the next few weeks, to test that previous low, that formed in December, which is around the 3,100 level mark. So I think what we're dealing with right now is a wave 4 correction, a wave 4 corrective move before we finally go and test that level, test that previous low near 3,000, 3,100. And then when we finally retest those lows near the previous lows and near the 200 moving average, then potentially we'll see a bottom pattern forming on Bitcoin. So personally, I think what we're dealing with at present is a wave 4 corrective move, then followed by a wave 5 to complete this entire downward trend, downward move, and then we'll see a final bottoming pattern followed by a bullish uptrend. So we're not there yet, but getting very interesting. Now we don't actually have charts for the next crypto I want to talk about, which is Ripple, XRP. But all I want to say about Ripple or XRP is this: gathering from the longer time frame chart, the weekly chart, it appears that Ripple is in a sort of a triangular consolidation pattern. And in this triangular consolidation pattern, it's likely what we're dealing with is a very complex correction, very kind of complex consolidation. Which means what? This is likely to be a very unpredictable and messy chart on Ripple, on XRP. And that's what usually happens when you see these consolidations. One thing to expect, though, one interesting thing to keep your eye on XRP, on Ripple, is this. It's very probable that Ripple may break temporarily to the upside of this triangular formation. Be careful, because if you get a breakout from the top of that triangular formation, what I think is going to happen is a false breakout. Typically, we often see a lot of false breakouts before the market eventually bottoms. All right, so be aware that there could be a lot of false breakouts from the triangular formation to the upside or downside. And those false breakouts can be useful signals, by the way, because eventually we'll find out whether Ripple eventually is going to break to the upside of this or not. But again, be aware that it's going to be a very messy, unpredictable movement on XRP before we finally see a bottoming formation, which could be weeks from now. Thanks very much. Actually, months, I beg your pardon, it could be months from now. Thanks a lot.